Wilson, who was elected in 1913, it was Wilson's administration that resegregated or instituted official segregation in the federal government. And there were civil rights leaders who came and complained to him about this, and he said, well, you had to do it because they had to preserve, there were concerns about rising tension between whites and coloreds, was in using the terminology that he was using.
Right.
To which they would respond, well, there hasn't been any of this tension for 50 years. That we had desegregation in the federal government for more than 50 years after the Civil War, and now you're coming in resegregating, and somehow or other it ended up being the Republicans that were wearing this. And the Democrats, of course, were, as I say, they were the slavery party. And the Ku Klux Klan were actually political activists working for the Democratic Party in the southern states during the Reconstruction period after the Civil War.
Right.
They were not an independent organization. They were sort of like the on-the-ground activists for the Democratic Party. Now, one other interesting thing, only because I want to point out this is not me railing against the Democrats, This is me trying to be honest about all of this stuff. So, towards the end of the Civil War, the President Lincoln, who was an abolitionist, anti-slavery, issued the Emancipation Proclamation.
That's right.
The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves.
That's right.
No, it's not right.
Well,
the reason it's not right, I know you know the answer to this already, Nick. But the reason it's not right is because the Emancipation Proclamation actually only freed the slaves in the southern states.
Confederacy. In
the Confederacy, that they proclaimed that they were free. What people have forgotten is that there were actually 4 slave states that were in the Union that did not secede: Maryland, Missouri, Delaware, and Kentucky were slave states, and they remained in the Union during the Civil War. And the Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to slaves in Union slave states. So I think that because of this, if we're going to apply these standards equally, I think that Abraham Lincoln's figure ought to be removed from every currency that it's currently on in the United States, and that the Lincoln Memorial should be removed.
Now, he's on Mount Rushmore, is he not?
That is a great question, and I do not know the answer to it, but I think you're right. I think he is on Mount Rushmore. About. So it's at some point in time, all of this has to stop. It all has to stop. People have to stop trying to revise history.
Yes, look,
teach it the way it was. If Sir Johnny MacDonald in Canada was a racist, then say it. I don't have a problem with that. Maybe he was a racist. A lot of racists around in those days. Okay? So say it. I don't have a problem with that. But don't erase him from history because of it. Because that's whitewashing history. And a generation from now, 2 generations from now, when you say, when you've eliminated Sir Johnny MacDonald or Lord Cornwallis or any of these people from Queen the history Victoria. Books, we are not even going to know who these people were in order to learn that there was a history of racism there. And I just don't think that's a healthy thing. If it's a bad thing, and I think it is a bad thing, then do not be afraid to confront it. But in order to confront it, it has to remain part and parcel of your history.
Well, I did a little looking while you were talking about Woodrow Wilson, and I said, okay, if we follow the logic of removing names from things of people who we now don't like anymore because they were racist in our mindset, with no context to the world that they lived in, you're going to have to do a lot of removing of Wilson's name. These are just international buildings. This is not military vessels. This is not highway infrastructure. This is nothing else. This is just this. Let's see. The Hotel President Wilson in Geneva would have to have the name come down, be named something else. The Palais Wilson in Geneva, which is the current headquarters of the Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, that would have to change. Place Wilsona, a square in northern Warsaw. Park Wilsona, a city park in Poznan. I don't know where that is. Woodrow Wilson Boyhood Home. Woodrow Wilson House. Woodrow Wilson Presidential Library. Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, part of the Smithsonian Institution. Woodrow Wilson Pub in Carlisle, England. Woodrow Wilson Service Area, New Jersey Turnpike. Let's see. And Hamilton. Okay. So those are just the international ones they would have to cleanse.
The list goes on.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm not going to bore the listener with, reams and reams of this stuff, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. But to follow their logic, you now have to cleanse the world of this man's name on any kind of building or any kind of infrastructure or in any way, shape, or form with some kind of society, some high school of higher education. It just has to go. Even his boyhood home would have to go. We couldn't call it the Woodrow Wilson family home or boyhood home. You'd have to call it a former president's boyhood home and not tell him who it was.
Clearly.
Yeah. So this is the height of the logic that we're dealing with when we try to revise history. I mean, where do you stop? Right? It's not like we're endorsing Adolf Hitler and all of a sudden somebody says, do you know what this guy did? And even in that case, I wouldn't take down, remove from history Adolf Hitler for the reasons you've already articulated.
Now, in fairness, there are no statues around Adolf Hitler.
That's what I did.
Statues around.
But I don't want them expunged from the history books, and I don't want artifacts taken out of museums. I want the horror of what the Nazis did to stay in everybody's mind so they know what a real Nazi is when they encounter one. Because they are real Nazis out there.
Yeah, well,
not many, thank God.
Nazi wannabes, let me put it that way.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, it's there really is no organized Nazi movement out there. These days there are small pockets of wannabes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes, but the point I'm making is that as evil a man as he was, he still played a significant role in history. And same thing with Stalin and Mao and all these other guys.
Sure, absolutely.
I wouldn't call it Stalin Square if I had a town, but I would certainly have it in a museum saying Stalin, here's what he looked like, this is what he did, this is his record, so that people can remember what a real communist looks like.
Right. Yeah. So, and this is all I'm saying is, okay, be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. You do not want to erase the history of you don't want to erase your history, okay? And say what you will about some of these people. Say what you will about Woodrow Wilson. Lots of things I don't like about him. I think he was an awful president. I think that he was, when it came to international politics in particular, I think he was terrible. I think he caused a lot of damage to the international system that contributed to the rise of the National Socialists in Germany. Not caused, but contributed to the outbreak of the Second World War. The same thing with Franklin Roosevelt. I think Franklin Roosevelt was a terrible foreign policy president. I think he was a terrible domestic president. When I look at the record, but why would you want to erase him? And you know what? If I was following the example of the left progressives, and I had political power, I would be just as justified in going around taking down statues of Franklin Roosevelt and destroying the Franklin Roosevelt Memorial and all of this stuff, why not? Okay.
Well, using
he
your
wasn't
logic,
very
yes.
friendly to Jews. He
No.
wasn't necessarily very friendly to African Americans. I don't know whether the man was, it's fair to say he was a racist or not, but anyway, we're running over time, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be back in a few minutes if you're listening to the live show. And if you're listening to the podcast, thanks for joining us, and you can catch us later here on ThinkRadio.ca.